Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Nausicaä Ministries podcast.
Is there any point in saving the world after it's already ended? We're going to be asking that question and more on today's episode of Systematic Geekology. We are the Priests of the Geeks, covering today the film Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, joined today by a special guest, a friend of mine from seminary, Herbie, who will be here today to join me as we are both kind of Ghibli heads. We have just found out about each other not too long ago. So, Herbie, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Hello, everybody. I am Herbie. I also go by the name Retro Herbie on the few times that I do stream on Twitch. I am, as he mentioned, I am a seminary student as well. And I'm here to geek out with one of the movies that I do love.
Excellent. Well, speaking of geeking out, what have you been geeking out on recently?
Well, recently we've been doing a big marathon of the Studio Ghibli movies, and it kind of started off with the movie that we're talking about today. And we've been kind of hitting on a rhythm of watching about one or two of them a week, and it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to go wrong with Ghibli overall. And this episode is like a proposed start of a potential extra series we might do along the way of covering all the Ghibli films. So we're going to start with the beginning, which a caveat about what this actually is. But before that, I'll go into what I've been geeking out on. That is My Adventures with Superman, which has been phenomenal these past couple episodes. We're about halfway through the season, I think, and I'm ready for more. So with all that in mind, we're going to get into this bad boy, discussing, of course, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. This is technically not a Studio Ghibli film. It has since been retconned in as one, created in 1984, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, because he was the one who directed it, because he is so integral to Studio Ghibli. It's kind of been just added in, even though people who actually do the research know it's not one. So, you know what? Whatever. We're going to do whatever we want because I'm in charge. And I'm saying it's a Studio Ghibli film. So, also in this film, one thing you guys might want to know is how it inspired several other media that you may have consumed along the way. Hideki Anno was one of the animators for this film, especially for our giant warriors. And you may notice there are some similarities with those and the Evas of Neon Genesis Evangelion. This is one of the things that helped inspire him create that along the way. Also, as well, we kind of see some ostrich-like creatures that look very familiar to something you may have seen in the video games, which was inspired by this film, that being, of course, the chocobos of Final Fantasy. Herbie, did you know either of these things?
I did not.
I knew about the Eva stuff. I didn't.
Now.
Yeah, I did not know about the chocobos. Yeah, it's crazy. So, what was your introduction to this film?
I watched it for the first time several years ago. Didn't really think too much of it. When we watched it again a few weeks ago when they had it in theaters for Ghibli Fest, I actually took a little bit of a deeper look at it because as I've gotten older, I like to examine the things that I watch a little bit more deeply. And when you do that, you tend to see a lot more connections, a lot more themes, and a lot more things that they're trying to influence the way you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also, when did I first watch this? It was I think it was during the beginning of the pandemic. So about 4 years ago. I had somehow missed this earlier on as a kid. Hadn't seen it as opposed to other Ghibli films. And when I first saw it back then, I was like, man, I was a fool for not watching this sooner. This is a spectacular movie. Not to give away my rating for later on, but this is in fact my favorite Ghibli movie of all time. So hintity hint about where that's going to go. So next up, we do have the idea. Herbie, would you like to help me give like a little synopsis of what happens in this film? We don't need to do every detail, but you want to go ahead and start us off?
So basically, it starts off, the world has ended a long time ago. So you're in like the post-apocalyptic world. It's been destroyed. And there's these not animals, there's this like poisonous forest that is continuing to spread across the world, what's left of the world after this basic nuclear war. And it's poisonous to humans. So when they're exposed to the spores from the forest, they get killed. Now, in the middle of all of this, a war erupts between two factions, and you've got Nausicaa and her village is basically caught up in the middle of it. And in the middle of all this, there is a prophecy that this Messiah-like figure is going to come and basically bring a balance to the world between the toxic forest and the people that remain. And our main character ends up being the fulfillment of that prophecy.
Yeah. There's a lot more, obviously, but like as a bare bones up plot, yeah, that's perfect for what we're about to get into here. This is a phenomenal film full of very dynamic characters, very interesting settings, and of course, great animation with Ghibli. Like, what else are you going to expect? So there is plenty to glean from this, and we're just going to move in to the meat and potatoes of this, and we'll discuss the themes and characters. So, Herbie, do you have a favorite character from the film?
I would have to say it would be Lord Uba.
And why is that?
Well, other than the fact that he's like a powerful swordsman, he does work very well as a transition character. He transitions a lot of the major acts of the film. So you meet him in the very beginning where he gets rescued after he's basically inspecting some villages. And later on, like when you were starting to get towards the climax of the movie, he functions as, in some ways, some comedic relief as you're transitioning from one point to another. So I think he's just a really well-placed character.
Yeah. Yupa is one of those characters, be like, what's your deal at the very beginning? And this film goes on, you go, okay, yeah, this is a very noble man, someone who is, investigating the wasteland, trying to keep contact between the other tribes and nations that exist in the world. But as he's finding out, more being overtaken by the forest, by the poison, by the ohm, these giant pill bug monstrosities that are massacring everyone along the way.
They make me think of giant roaches is what they make me think of.
Yeah. Unpleasant to the eye. I would not be befriending them like Nausicaa was, so I would have failed in this film. So, yeah, you put an excellent choice. As you said, like he can navigate between being a very serious character, but when the moments of comedy show up too. And it doesn't hurt that he's voiced by Patrick Stewart in the English dub. It's like, how much better can you get? Is there a better voice to trust than Patrick Stewart?
Especially for a hero type figure.
Yeah. So, yeah, solid choice. I mean, my actual answer, though, even as much as I like Yupa, my answer is Nausicaa. That may be the easy answer for some people, but I love her character so much. She is the very definition of a well-rounded character, of someone who has flaws, someone who is not like, and I'll throw this bait out there for people, someone not like a Rey Skywalker, who is someone I would very much accuse of being close to, if not a Mary Sue. Nausicaa is the kind of gal who tests the waters, doesn't just trust what people say, does things on her own, but also brings people in after she's experimented. She's got a scientific mind, but she can also give into a rage, and she can also cause problems that way. So there are many positive features about her, but also has some flaws as well. So I love her journey in this film of being this princess of this area, but living her own life, looking after the people, and finding the time to learn what does it mean to love your enemy. And this film does a magnificent job at that. How about a favorite scene or a favorite moment from this movie, Herbie?
Okay, so this is where I might be taking the cheap pick, and that is actually the climax where she is calming the stampeding, raging ohm and it comes out that she is that messianic figure in the movie. And you have the amazing music going on in the background of her as a kid going la 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 la, and it's like it's just beautiful.
Oh, no doubt. That is, I mean, it's a solid pick. I mean, it's very hard to go wrong with the scene in this movie anyways. But to go the build up to this moment, we've had the war between was it Pejite and oh gosh, what's the other nation? Tolmekians. And how they've manipulated things to where Nausicaa's valley is going to be destroyed by the Ohm as kind of like a sacrificial lamb to also kill off the princess of the Tolmekians to cause a succession crisis there. And yet Nausicaa intervenes at the cost of her own life. And sorry to spoil the film, but it's been out for over 20 years, so that's kind of on you. I would highly encourage you to watch it. So yeah, we will be talking spoilers. And I agree with you, to see her fulfill that prophecy, and like typically what would have been, as is displayed in their art too in the movie, would have been a man, yet it's her. And it's not done in the way where it feels cheap. It's not done in the way where it's just pandering. It makes sense within the story. So yeah,
well,
excellent.
The story also builds up to her being that figure all the way from the very beginning. Like,
yes,
the prophecy says they'll be clad in blue. She's wearing blue the entire time. It's dark image, like very dark, like colors for the movie, very thematic dark colors. But she's always wearing blue, except for a few scenes. So it's very clear that she's going to be there. So it's not like some like role reversal twist at the last minute. It when you're going to do it like that, yeah, it's very well done the way they did it.
Oh yes, absolutely. My pick, on the other hand, is kind of a mix of two scenes. And it's the initial, because we hear early in the film when Yupa comes into the village, Nausicaa meets up with him, saves him, and she says, hey, I have something to show you. And the reveal of what she has to show him is that she has taken the time to experiment with the plants of the forest to try, which in the soil that they have just grows and grows and overtakes and releases this poison that just kills humans on contact. But she's used soil from deeper underground to see if maybe that changes things. And it does. And I love the idea. This is a very small thing. It's like you could just write an action hero character who just solves problems with violence, which, hey, she does solve some problems with violence in this film. But ultimately, there's something more to her in that she's experimenting with these things. And I'll kind of cheat, like I always do, and give a second scene. And that'll be when the Tolmekians invade her country, kill her father in front of her. She starts fighting, and Yupa intervenes, having her sword plunge into his own hand to prevent her from being a murderer. That is such a great, powerful character moment between pretty much everyone in that scene. I love that so much.
Her reaction to that was actually a really big thing as well, because she didn't realize she was capable of that kind of rage.
Yes.
And it scares her. It ultimately scares her to death.
And that's one thing about Ghibli films. It's like, it's never like an defensive measures at any point in time, but it is very anti-revenge as a company. It's very anti-war, anti-causing devastation to others. So she's not at fault for wanting to protect her people, but she is at fault for how she's going about it, for going with murder in mind instead of trying to find a peaceful solution. And that's one thing I do like with these films, because normally when I see something like that in a film, I kind of just roll my eyes and go, great, written by a bunch of hippies from Hollywood that don't understand anything about anything. And then I just move on with my life. But Ghibli has a way of showing the nuance in conflict to show actually who these characters are, to make me go, okay, now I understand what you're getting behind when you give me the anti-war message. And it seems like a really good indicator of that.
It definitely is. And even with how they're dealing with the war between the Tabikians and what was the other group again?
The Pejites.
The Pejites. They make it very clear that the way they were going about the war was the wrong way. They were basically going to try and annihilate the other side by resurrecting one of the ancient giants, which is what got them in this entire world to begin with. Yes. And then even how they dealt with the forest. You have, I think it was the Pejites or was it the Tomikians that were trying to use the giant to destroy the forest, which they showed the attempt and it failed.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, they're like, once those things happen, it just does nothing but create more harm.
Yeah, and it's just portrayed extremely well. over this entire film of like, what does it mean to fight? What does it mean to defend yourself? Is there ever a just cause to attack an enemy? And it doesn't do that typical, no one should ever fight. No, there are reasons to fight, but you better make sure you're on the right side of things. You better make sure your heart is in the right place. And it's handled extremely well in this film because you have people like Lord Yupa who will fight when called for. You have the townspeople defending their homes from the Tolmekians, not out of revenge, but out of defending their way of life, defending their people from being controlled. Yeah, extremely well done. I could just gush over that, but there are other things we need to focus on unless you want to add something.
No, we have way too much more to talk about.
So, as we kind of brought up, I mentioned her as my favorite character, but do you believe that Nausicaa serves as a worthy protagonist for this movie?
So, yes, I think she absolutely does. She, in some ways, until the messianic figure comes out, she's kind of like the Indiana Jones, where she's in the middle of everything, driving the plot, but also everything would happen the exact same way if she wasn't there. So,
yeah, initially,
she's in the middle of a story, and it's all happening, and she's doing everything she can, but everything is happening, and we're seeing the story as the princess of this valley that's caught between two warring factions. And then when that moment comes, she is what saves her people. I think it's a perfect way to do the protagonist in this story.
That well said. I mean, from the very beginning, when we see her exploring the poison forest, we start learning a little about the world that, you can't breathe it in. You've got to be careful. So we see her not attacking anything, not trying to harm anything, just attempting to learn from what's around her so that she can bring something back that would be valuable. There's an ohm who has either died or shed its skin, and the eyes serve as a very valuable item that can be used by her people. So she decides to take it out. But when she hears someone under attack, she goes out and does something about it. And from her prior experimentation has learned actually how to calm the ohm, which no one has thought to do because attack has probably been the status quo for the majority of the 1,000 years it's been since that nuclear fire that happened. So it's nice to see someone who challenges things. So yeah, I agree. Not only is she my favorite here, but she serves as a very effective protagonist. There's plenty more from the rest. Is there something else you want to talk about for her?
Well, I think the next part that we wanted to go to of dealing with how she does the well, no, actually, I think that's a little bit further. But as she fills a messianic role, I think that was kind of in the things that we wanted to talk about today. I kind of have a flip on that because as I look at it from a Christian perspective, the messianic role that she fills is very, very far from what we look at as Christians. She isn't really believing that she is that person who fills the role. In some ways, she's almost laughing at the old priestess who is basically sharing the old prophecy. She is never really she's not pushing forward in the plot to save the people. She's always reacting. So she's not really in control of how she's saving the people. She's reacting even in how she's studying the forest. She's studying the forest simply to try and save her father because her father is succumbing to an illness from being exposed to it. None of this was her actively choosing to play the part in saving her people all the way until the very end where she's like, I have to calm the ohm specifically to save my people. She wasn't trying to really fulfill the prophecy even all the way to the end.
Yeah. And I think that's a good designation, a difference between, someone like Jesus versus Nausicaa is that, Jesus obviously came knowing what his purpose was, choosing to fulfill that purpose. Nausicaa along the way chooses to become that messianic figure in a sense to protect her people because no one else is going to step up to the plate. No one else understands the things that she does. And that doesn't happen without her exploring the world more. What is the name of the prince that she meets? That was it Asbel? Yeah, Asbel. And the two of them, when they actually explore the forest underneath and find that the soil is starting to purify from the trees. That's actually what the forest serves as. It's trying to restore Earth back to what it used to be before the war. And as a result of that, she sees a hope that didn't exist before. find something new to believe in, besides the general, hey, I want to protect my people from being, captured, enslaved, and forced in the middle of something they never asked to be in. And then she does something about it as this one singular ohm is being used. A baby ohm is being used as a trap, essentially.
Bait.
Bait to send the other ohm to attack that area by the Peshites as they've lost their kingdom. So they decided to go all scorched earth on the Tolmekians. Goodness gracious, can I not remember names to save my life? Tolmekians, even if it means innocent people get caught in the crossfire. So in a sense, you could kind of argue that's her leaving the 99 to save the one. I'm not going to go that far. That's definitely not what's intended, but I'll throw it as an idea of what's being done. So yeah, I think she serves effectively very well as a protagonist for this film. Anything else before we move on?
I think we're good to move on.
Okay.
If you'd like to support our show on Captivate, feel free to go to captivate.fm and find our show, subscribe. You'll get access to any future online D&D campaigns over there. You'll get an extra bonus question for 4 to 8 times a month. You'll get extra content like that through there. You also get a one-time donation you could make to help support the show right on Captivate. So you don't get anything for the one-time donation, but if you would like to just support the show once, do a quick donation, you can do that through captivate.fm. Our overhead includes editing software, marketing, equipment, recording software, and a whole lot of other stuff. And we really appreciate everybody who can help keep the lights on.
Now, another thing that normally when I see this in a film causes me to roll my eyes and groan because, oh, great, some more hippie BS about saving the earth. No, one of the things you'll also get in Studio Ghibli is that return to nature and how we should be protecting it. And it's done in the way that most of the time is not done by hitting you over the head with an anvil. But in this film itself, separate from the other Ghibli films, how well do you think its message about environmentalism is handled?
I think it's handled really well. You look at it, it's not saying, hey, you have to save the planet because the planet is more important than you are. It's you have to care for nature because if you don't, it will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably a really good way to put it because they've basically taken the mentality of what a lot of people have today of not even caring to the extreme, to the point where something had to correct.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's established way early on. And then I think Obaba is the name of the old woman who's kind of like the historian of the village. She explains about how things used to be. We used to control the earth until one day a war broke out, and a very short one at that unleashed utter and complete ecological damage to the entire planet, to the point where this film is almost an ecocide kind of film and that the entire environment is almost gone. But then we find out that's not true along the way, unless, well, it could be true if things stay on their current course where everyone keeps fighting one another and trying to fight the forest instead of working alongside it.
Well, even at that point, the forest has a lot of biodiversity. It has a lot of plants. It
Yes.
is going to survive. It's a matter of whether or not humans would be there to survive with it.
An excellent point to make, because that's one of the things the film does wrestle with. Do humans deserve to live in an environment that they themselves have destroyed? And I mean, you look around the entire world, we're still learning right now, are microplastics something we need to be concerned about? Because they're pretty much everywhere now. They're in our food, they're in our bodies. And that's a result of us not treating the environment well, not finding ways to biodegrade materials so that this doesn't negatively affect the things around us. Like, do humans deserve to live in this environment? The answer is no, we don't. But good news being, we do still, some of us, serve that God who said to control the earth, to watch over the earth, care for the earth, be fruitful and multiply. So we need to be careful about how we do that, though. There's the extreme of, well, we just keep going and everything we do will be fine because eventually Jesus is coming back. And there's the other one of being like, yeah, whatever. Things will just work out. But that's a very poor take to take on both sides. It's like, we've been called to cultivate. We've been charged with controlling this part of nature for the betterment of this world, for the betterment of us, and to the glory of God. So let's find a way to do that.
Now, I do think that there are some issues with how how the movie portrays taking dominion of the earth, where they're not really taking dominion anymore. They're falling back and they're hiding. But on the areas that they are taking dominion of, they're not just doing blanket destruction. They will use a little bit of fire to destroy the spores that they find that would kill them in the area that they live. And they're pretty much letting everything else be, because it ends badly if they attack that. Now, it is good to only use, like, don't burn down the whole forest just because you have 1 or 2 spores. Use a little bit of fire so that you can continue to have dominion, because if you burn down the whole forest, it's going to take 2-3 generations to get that forest back.
Yes.
So I do see a little bit of issue in what is being taught there and how to deal with nature, because it does lean on the not taking dominion side, where we as Christians do believe that we should take dominion over the earth.
Which we shouldn't expect from a Japanese production. But I get what you're saying. In that, yeah, it's a bit too far on that end of just let nature run its course, because we are called to be stewards of this earth. We are called to govern in that area over the animals, over the plants, over the soil, so on and so forth.
But they're not all the way on the far side, which is a breath of relief. Like there is a little bit of, we do take some control when we need to.
Yes, because like we mentioned earlier, like Nausicaa is trying to learn how to interact with these plants. Is there some way where we can coexist with one another? And she finds, well, the topsoil, which after this point in time wouldn't have been that bad with radiation. It's 1,000 years. It would have eventually changed a little bit as I understand things. But still, for the purposes of this movie, we'll say it is as it is. And it's irradiated. It's not able to maintain fertility. But the soil underground is. And you only find that by testing things, by trying to find a way to have dominion over that area. And the earth itself is changing. It is actually repairing itself. There's kind of a Mother Gaia thing in the background here. It's not like it's saying like the earth itself has a consciousness. You could argue in the film maybe they're saying that. But there seems to be nature fighting back against what humans have done, using the Olm as protectors, because every time the humans get near the forest, they try and burn it down, when the forest is actually trying to repair what they did earlier.
And there's definitely some conflict in the ideology that's going back there again, where you can definitely tell it's like there is some kind of a divine design going on with the forest. But they don't want to say it's the design. Unfortunately, I don't know how it comes across in Japanese. I only speak English, so I didn't watch it in the Japanese version. I'm sorry, guys. Dubs are acceptable, even if they're not the best. So, but they want to say it evolved that way. It was evolved to do this purpose, but that's not how evolution works.
Yeah, evolution is not goal-oriented in that manner.
Evolution is all about doing something to survive, not doing something for a greater good.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a clear way that things were designed. You have the Ohm there to protect the forest. You have the forest there to clean what was damaged by humanity. And there's clear ideals there that something is controlling what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. Is there anything else you want to add to this part before we move on?
No, I think we're good on that part.
Okay, perfect. So next question. Across pretty much almost every single Ghibli film, if Miyazaki's behind it, one of his intentions is that he tries to make villains that he doesn't want to end up being, your cartoonishly evil Saturday morning mustache twirling types who are bereft of rational personal motivations. So for this film, does this ring true for you?
So there are some aspects, it looks like in this film, that there are like those personal motivations. But it is true that in most of Ghibli movies, you can identify with the villain just as quickly as you can identify with the protagonist. And they're dealing with things that we deal with as humans today. So everything looks very, very well written, very well established here. It's not just some thing that could never happen. You can see people acting the way they act in these films.
Absolutely, because when the Tolmekians do invade the valley, it's because they're trying to utilize the giant warrior as a last-ditch effort to fight back against the poisonous forest that is killing off humans. Is that a noble goal? Kinda. It's not one I would get behind. It's one that relies on using a weapon that caused the end of the world to get rid of this forest. So, but there's also the fact that if they don't get rid of the forest, because they don't know about the things being repaired down below, they don't know about the soil being fixed. So from their point of view, killing the forest with this giant warrior is saving humanity. So I understand why that plan happened, why they thought it was a good idea, and why they're trying to enact it, even when all rationality says, no, don't use the thing that destroyed the world to try and save the world. And Princess Kushana, who kind of serves as like the anti-Nausicaa for this film, is a very effective villain in that you understand why she's doing what she's doing. It's not out of pettiness. It's not out of profit or greed or anything like that. It's, I'm trying to protect my people. This is what I've been told is the best idea. So I'm going to utilize that because what other options do I have?
More and more cities are being destroyed or being lost. There are entire kingdoms that are just going away. They feel like they have to do something.
As established by Yupa from the very beginning of the film, humanity is in dire straits. Over 1,000 years, we've gone smaller in number. So what's your plan? What are you supposed to do? Well, this giant warrior idea is about all we have. So let's utilize it. And then what do you think about the Peshites in this whole thing, in their plan?
I don't really see much good in how their plan was. They literally sacrificed their city. They're willing to sacrifice another kingdom entirely for their political goals.
Mm-hmm.
I find it really hard to find a redemptive quality in their line of thinking, even if I can somewhat understand how they feel.
Yeah, out of the two, I give them the lesser motivation in all this. They know what the Ohms are capable of, so why test it on your own city? And I think that may be a change from the manga. This is based off of Hayao Miyazaki's manga that was not finished at the time of this movie. It actually finished like in 94. So about, if I remember correctly, so almost like 10 years after this movie came out. So there's a different ending. There's other stuff there that I haven't explored too much. But if I remember correctly, in there, the Tolmekians had actually invaded, and this was like their last ditch. Okay, well, forget them. We're going to just scorch the entire earth because they don't deserve to live if we don't get to live, in their point of view. So it's that moment of desperation that brings in a plan as awful as this, as inhuman as this, to use a baby. A baby gigantic insect that has murdered humans before, but still the ethics of that kind of, you go a little, I don't know.
But is that using it any better than mutual assured destruction in nuclear war?
Oh, absolutely not. It's not any better.
So while I can't really find anything redemptive from the plan, I can identify with it because we already hold that type of mentality in our own defense strategy as humans today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's mutually assured destruction is kind of the best way to put it. In that, you'll take us out, but we'll take you out with us. And if that happens in this film, then the message would be, humanity does not deserve to survive. And if it were not for the actions of people like Lord Yupa and Nausicaa and the people of the Valley of the Wind, that's kind of where we would have ended up. So thank God this is not a piece of trash film that decided, well, time for everyone to suck and die. Because that's not what happened. We do understand where the villains are coming from. That doesn't mean we have to agree with them. And we're prevented from having that moment of just hopelessness at the end of this film when something is done to protect others. And you want to head into that scene?
At the scene at the very end where she ends up calming an entire herd of these massive, ugly bugs that want to do nothing but destroy her home.
Yes.
And this is where it's got a very simple color scheme across the whole movie. It you can honestly tell it was based off of the manga, which would have been very simple in coloring as well. But everything when it's blue is peaceful. But when the Ohm get mad, they turn bright red. So you, for almost 2/3 of this scene, see nothing but red on the screen. And she calms things down. She saves basically everybody at this point, everybody who's still alive. And you see, not changing from red back to blue, but you get this like golden color as they basically save her from being trampled, like the save her from being trampled, and everything gets turned to calm. You've got this, some people would say really creepy music, but it's actually really beautiful. But everything goes from everybody's about to die to, hey guys, let's make peace.
I mean, after witnessing a miracle like that, how could you not? I mean, you'd have to be a very pharisaical to continue to fight after that point. So we brought it up a little earlier. We brought it up just now. There's some Christian imagery used in this film, some of which is actually intentional. Specifically for Nausicaa, she acts in a, as we mentioned earlier, kind of Messiah, Jesus kind of figure role. Now, in your opinion, Herbie, is this handled well? And what parts do you think were done intentionally?
So I can't
spoilers, not all of it was.
I can't say for what was done intentionally. I think, so this is where I'm torn, because it's handled really well as far as the story is concerned. Mm-hmm. But I think it's handled in a very dangerous way as far as it would be for a tool for Christians to be taught something. Because it's close enough to be recognizable, but different enough to be giving a very, very wrong message about Christianity. So that's where I'm torn. It's done really well from a literary perspective. But from a theological perspective on, our Christianity views, it's very dangerous.
How so?
Well, for one, she's acting in a different type of role than Christ did. She's saving people, bringing peace then, where Christ came intentionally, knowing he was going to die from the very moment he started. When everything he did was an intentional thing. He wasn't reacting. He didn't almost kill somebody out of rage. He intentionally went to die, and it wasn't something that was about to save the Jews from the Romans. It was his own people killing him. So there's just enough differences in it that I think it just makes it hard for me to think it's done well from a theological perspective.
I'll agree with that. And in fact, it is that scene in particular that was not intentional, because Miyazaki, surprise, surprise, as a Japanese man where less than 2% of the country are Christian, is not among that number. So he did not intend Jesus parallels there. You can see from our background how people can believe that, but you raise a good point. The intentionality of that. Nausicaa doesn't know she's coming back from the dead. Nausicaa's doing it as a self-sacrifice for her people to potentially live. But there's a difference between the motivations. One is assured what's going to happen, even at personal cost and suffering. The other is doing it hoping for the best and is rewarded for that. So that is not intentional, but like so many other things, the messianic figure of the prophecy, that's more intentional. I'm trying to think of what else off the top of my head. Her loving nature towards people, that's kind of based off of some Christian ideals as well. But for the most part, what people would think would be the obvious parallel is not, as he intended.
You got to love unintended parallels.
So there's that. So, as mentioned earlier, we have these giant robots that have destroyed the entire world, these known as the giant warriors. And they serve as kind of our nuclear analogs in this film. So, have at it. What do you think about their use in this film? Do they really fit that piece?
Well, I think it definitely fit the role. I mean, I can't help but think that a man who came from on the countries that was hit with a nuclear warhead in an act of war would not be trying to link that to a nuclear war. But he does do a good job of saying, hey, it has the same devastation, but it really was something different. It was a different type of technology, because it is a fantasy world that he's creating. So all the technology, even what's recognizable to us, is very different in this world. So I think it's really good that he did it as an analogy in the way he did. And it's also not clear that they were completely robotic, because they did have flesh. They had to grow. They had to mature before they could be used. So it brings a lot of interest in it, other than just, oh, hey, we all went to war and killed everybody.
Yeah. That's an excellent point, too. It's like, if these are indeed organic, but also mechanical beings, that raises a lot of ethical questions into how that happened. Where did that organic material come from? Is that because they're essentially born in eggs. Does that mean that there's some maturation process involving human tissue? Was the science of the 1,000 years ago that abominable that they went above and beyond? And you raise a very excellent point too. There has only been one sovereign nation in the entire world that has been hit by 2 nuclear blasts, that being Japan. So if there's any country in the world that has a right to kind of speak on it, it would be them. And God help us when we do get to Grave of the Fireflies. I don't think there's going to be a dry eye in the house, which is kind of one of the intents of the film. But yeah, I think it's used incredibly effectively here, especially when it fails in the end to save the day. Because I think from a Japanese
point of view, failed the first time, and it failed the second time when they tried to use it to clean up their mess.
Yeah. From the Japanese point of view, you don't want to have that succeeding. Now, obviously, when we look at it from the Americans' perspective, there was either we invade Japan, and the casualty figures we were drawing up were high hundreds of thousands, if not a million casualties not just being dead, but those injured and unable to fight, versus using 2 atomic bombs. And we can talk about the ethics of that on another time. But from their perspective, it makes a lot of sense for it not to be the thing that saves the day. And I would agree it's used extremely well in that regard, because it shouldn't save the day, because it's the thing that caused the end of the world, outside of the fact, well, the people were the ones using them who caused the end of the world. So for people to use it now, and that being, hey guys, it destroyed the world last time, but this time it's got us, would have kind of ruined one of the messages of the film about our responsibility and utilizing technology for helping others and not causing harm.
I don't know if you remember a few years back in the political spectrum, they kept arguing about dealing with the budget or whether or not you should use a scalpel or a hatchet. Well, in this instance, they were trying to use this big thing as like a big hatchet to cut down the entire forest, where the Valley of the Wind had learned, use small amounts of fire. Don't destroy everything. Destroy the small amounts that are the bad part, but keep what's good. And it made a very good point there. You don't want to destroy everything. It takes generations for a forest to grow back. It only takes a few minutes to destroy it.
Yes. That's the thing about destruction. It's simple. It's easy. It's a lot harder to cultivate. It's a lot harder to live with the things around you. But that's the thing worth doing, because more good comes from that. And I do like that the film does kind of point that way.
Not that you can't use destruction.
Yes.
Don't destroy everything. Only destroy what needs to be destroyed. Save everything else.
Be reasonable about your destruction, as it were. Well, Herbie, you have anything else to say about this film before we get to the wrap up?
No, I think we're good to wrap up.
Okay. So, guys, we do have a special bonus question that is only for our Patreon and Captivate listeners. We're going to be discussing if we had to choose one item from the film to bring into this world for our own personal use, what would it be and why? So, Herbie, Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. How do you rate this out of 10?
I would say 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10?
Yes.
Okay. Solid. Yeah, I'm a complete another sucker for this movie. It is my favorite. This is a 10 out of 10 Ghibli film for me. One that we watched not too long ago is also a 10 out of 10. But we'll get there when we get there. I love this film. I love the works of Studio Ghibli. I'm hoping to do more episodes on this with other people. Herbie, you're more than welcome to come back as we discuss other films too. Thank you for accepting my invite for this. Do you have a recommendation for the audience before we head out?
So we mentioned Grave of the Fireflies. I think more people need to watch that movie. Yes, you are going to be sad, but it is such a good movie. So well written, so well done. It makes you feel what they wanted you to feel. And that is the mark of a really good movie.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. You got. I prefer people to know beforehand. You're probably not going to feel good at the end. That way, you're a little mentally okay with what's going on. You know what's going to happen. But yeah, it's a worthy film. It's definitely something that needs to be watched.
It has the reputation of being very sad, but it goes so much further than its reputation.
Yes, there is a point to the film. It's not just there to make you feel hopelessness. There's a reason it exists. But for my recommendation, as someone who, unlike some of my other co-hosts who have been enjoying it, and I'm glad they are, I have been lukewarm at best on The Acolyte so far. It is not really grabbed me in the way that it has for others. So as kind of a counter to that, which there's still plenty of time for it to turn around and for me to be wrong, and I'm very willing to be wrong. I kind of want to be wrong and, enjoy Star Wars. If you want to get something that kind of gets my take on certain developments that happen there, just read Darth Plagueis by James Luceno. It is Legends canon now, so that means it is no longer part of the Disney canon, but it helps set up who Darth Plagueis is, his apprenticeship with Palpatine, his exploration of finding how to create life through the Force and all this. So there's that. Guys, thank you very much for listening today. Had a great time today with Herbie. Hope you had a good time yourself, man.
Oh, it's always fun.
Excellent. If you get a chance, guys, to leave a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. Wherever you are, just let us know there. As well, you can send episode topics our way. We're about to do one not too long from now on God of War and Assassin's Creed. We really appreciate you guys saying, hey, why don't you guys consider doing this? Chances are someone that we have amongst our hosts knows what you're talking about and is willing to do an episode on it. You can also reach out to us with your questions because you guys have gotten us to the point where we have over 100 subscribers on our YouTube page. And as part of that promise is we are doing a Q&A session with your questions that we will answer as many hosts as possible to show up there. So thank you guys for being faithful in that regard. I would also like to thank some patrons today, Russell Gentry, Justin Vaughn, Annette Knoll, and Jeannie Mattingly. You guys are the best. Thank you for everything that we do. Keeping the lights on here, but remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of Greece.
Make sure you follow us on Instagram, catch us live at events we are holding or attending, get updates when we post new episodes of the podcast, see our other favorite content that we lift up and support, as well as just see our beautiful faces and engage with us through messages. Maybe watch a reel and give us the feedback of what you think of the show.
Hello, friends. If you like systematic ecology, then there's a host of other podcasts in our network that we think you will like just as much. And so we're part of the Anazal Ministry Podcast Network, and we hope that you can hop over and subscribe with all the podcasts that are on our network. Like, for instance, The Homily, which is, Pastor Will Rose's sermon here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. You have another podcast called The Whole Church Podcast, the OG, the originals, the beginner of it all. Yes, Joshua Noel and TJ working for unity among the church and having great conversations with the wide spectrum of those who are involved in Christian ministry and the church. You have My Seminary Life by Brandon Knight, who's discussing what he's learning in seminary, he is learning his theological studies and bringing to the surface those big things that we're wrestling with and thinking through theologically in the church and beyond. There's the Let Nothing Move You podcast from Christian Ashley, who is walking through the Bible in a very Bible study type fashion and walking through the biblical narrative. You have Dummy for Theology. I don't think Joshua is a dummy, but hey, he's going to lift up theological themes that he's thinking about and wrestling with. And maybe there's not a lot of answers, but there's definitely a lot of great questions out there that he's lifting up with some great theologians across the whole spectrum of Christianity. And then there's the Bible After Hours. Man, if you like to get risky, if you like to get controversial, there's this foul-mouthed preacher who goes through the Bible from a more progressive point of view, challenging the status quo of the modern church. Yeah, you don't want any kids around with that podcast. And then you have the Clydes, one of my favorite couples that I like to listen to. One of the hosts here on Systematic Ecology, Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde, go through weekly discussions and kind of a devotional, conversational method of what's going on in their lives, where they see God moving in their lives, and what God is up to in the world. So those are the podcasts, a part of the AMP network. Subscribe, follow. We hope you can be a part of all that great network with the wonderful podcasts at AMP.